And look at what's happening over there in Russia and Iran. The Russians have sent this military ship, according to reports, and they're basically carrying out some kind of exercise. The Russian Ministry of Defense released this video showing this ship, called Stoysik, arriving at the port of Iran in the midst of high tensions with the United States. Here you can see the captains of the ships and the Iranian Navy acting as if they're there, planning things and, a kind of exercise. Supposedly, according to reports from the Iranian port of Bandar Abbas, before the military exercises, they're going to be doing this exercise. Let's say, as an agreement, this conversation, they're looking at maps and things like that over there. The exercise is with the IRGC, that is, with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, in other words, the military force of the Ayatollahs. Well, that's part, let's say, of what's happening in that part of the world. Also, check the type and number of military aircraft that the United States is currently deploying to Italy, Greece, Germany, and Hungary. Or let's look at the number of planes that are currently being sent, and these would be, well, in the context of what's happening with Iran, right? Very close now. If we go directly to the map, if the planes are deploying here, Iran is on this side, so there's a very short distance left. All the military planes are leaving the United States for this area, and at the same time, there are movements being seen in Iran around the nuclear zones or facilities. Let's discuss the details of what's known about this matter. And while you're here, I ask you for a comment or a like. Wouldn't it be great to know that you're here first, right? And also, I want to thank the whole community who watch us later. Thank you as well for participating and leaving us a comment. Where are you watching from? What are your thoughts on the current situation? Do you think the conflict will happen this coming weekend? On one hand, it seems like they want to reach an agreement, but on the other hand, there are moves that keep escalating the situation. The images I showed of these facilities, of these nuclear sites, nuclear facilities, let's say, because it's not exactly clear whether they're making nuclear weapons in these areas or just enrichment, as they insist. But the satellite images show fortifications in the Iranian strategic complexes, while Tehran denies that it is seeking atomic weapons amid heightened tensions. What the images reveal are clear strategic movements. Para el régimen iraní, satellite images show fortifications in the Iranian strategic complexes, Tehran, Busque. The construction was accelerated. The most recent images show a concrete sarcophagus completely covered. The Institute for Science and International Security also identifies the area as part of the zone known as Telegon 2, where there is supposedly a high-strength cylindrical chamber approximately 36 meters long. This type of infrastructure could be used for conventional testing, but it is also compatible with the development of components related to nuclear weapons. It is also at the Isfahan complex where the most drastic changes have been detected. This is also part of what is being observed at this facility, in Natanz, for example, where there has really been tremendous activity in recent months. Tehran insists that its program is simply for peaceful purposes, but this has not been credible, and in the meantime, negotiations are being attempted to carry out a diplomatic negotiation, because the next step seems to be inevitable, which is a conflict. Just yesterday, some congressmen have been appearing on screen in the media saying that yes, there are risks, but well, maybe the biggest risk would be to let the Iranians have nuclear weapons. In Israeli media, the phrase war is imminent is already appearing. They're already preparing there, according to Israeli media sources. Israelis warn that a military conflict could begin in the coming days and last for several weeks. So, could this weekend be the start of a war? According to sources cited by the Times of Israel and also by another outlet called Axios, they claim that a confrontation between the United States and Iran could begin within days. We hadn't seen this before. I mean, yes, there were challenges, there were tensions at a very high level, but now that they're openly saying the conflict is practically going to start in the next few days, this hadn't been seen before. Thank you, the official said. An official, let's say, within the White House, close to Donald Trump's inner circle, has revealed that there is a 90% chance of military action in the coming days, or at the latest, within weeks. But it seems that the decision in the White House has already been made. Yes, the former head of intelligence, the former head of military intelligence of Israel, named Amos Yadin, he stated that we are much closer to a conflict than at any other time, although he reminded that a superpower does not go to war in a matter of days without exhausting diplomacy. In other words, many factors have to be taken into account first, especially because if not, then there could even be internal political war. They're not going to say, hey, you went to war without exhausting all diplomatic options, so all diplomatic avenues will be exhausted first, and then, if it comes to a fight or not, then it goes to conflict. Air tracking data shows movement of United States F-22, F-35, and F-16 fighter jets from the Middle East, as well as tanker planes for in-flight refueling. This is a very serious issue. In fact, there are even websites dedicated solely to tracking where military planes from all countries are going. So they have been showing a significant deployment, not an advance, and not everything can be seen. I mean, not everything is visible. Some planes are stealthy or turn off their transponders so you can't detect them. How do you track those? The tanker planes usually go with several fighter jets and refuel each one. Yes, so since fighter jets can't get from one continent to another, they don't have that much fuel. They're very fast, but they have little range, let's say. In terms of distance, well, there are planes flying alongside them, refueling them, the classic way. So, when you suddenly see several tanker planes heading to the Middle East, you wonder, wait, who's flying with them? Surely a lot of planes of this type. The Secretary of Energy, on the other hand, Chris Wright, stated that he will have Iran's nuclear progress one way or another, meaning the United States will have Iran's progress one way or another. Making it clear that the military option is still on the table, Iran announced naval exercises with Russia. As I already told you at the beginning of the video, this is going to be, by the way, I don't think I told you where, right? I didn't tell you where it's going to be, but where it's going to be. The Iranian military exercise, well, it's going to be in this area. Look, here's Iran, right? And the Russians and the Iranians are going to do a military exercise in the Gulf of Oman, somewhere around here. Where is the United States aircraft carrier? Here is one of the aircraft carriers. The Abraham Lincoln is here. It's around this area, at least according to the last information we had. And on this side is the United States ship Gerald Ford. This is the largest one the United States has, the most modern, etc. So there's one here and another one on this side. And right in front of them, basically, the Russians and the Iranians are going to be here doing a military exercise. After announcing the strategic temporary closure of the Strait of Hormuz during maneuvers that have happened and that are going to happen, well, obviously the tension increases, because if you close the Strait of Hormuz with military forces, what is this little piece? You don't let oil leave all countries, and even if it's only for a few hours, this creates risk because people wonder what would stop you from doing it longer. There's also a plan known from the Iranians that they could lay underwater mines throughout this entire area. If they lay underwater mines, a small boat can pass without any problem, but a cargo ship can't pass, an oil tanker can't pass, because it would explode. See? Entonces, so if they lay mines here to close off the Strait of Hormuz, the passage, let's say, would be very complicated, and it would greatly affect oil and the world economy. I mean, it's not just about oil prices going up or down, it's the domino effect it can have on the world's economy. Because people will say it's not just higher prices and having to pay more for oil, but there could actually be shortages at certain times. Today, if I had an oil order that was supposed to arrive on this date, now I have to order it from somewhere else. And by ordering it from somewhere else, the price goes up, but also the time. So that extra time also has a cost. And well, the domino effect is going to happen. Let's move on to other important points. Notice that on the other hand, the following also stands out. Donald Trump and Prime Minister Starmer, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, agreed to maintain diplomatic pressure to prevent the Iranian regime from obtaining nuclear weapons. Something very curious, something very strange, because everything points to the fact that a conflict is going to happen. But at the same time, this comment is made within the United Kingdom and the United States. They say that they could go the diplomatic route and that, in fact, that's the agreement, right? He says, Donald Trump and Starmer agree to maintain maximum diplomatic pressure while negotiations in Switzerland progress and threats in the Persian Gulf increase. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, and the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, held this call, which was key to coordinating a common strategy regarding the Iranian nuclear program. Both agree on a central point. Iran must not develop nuclear weapons under any circumstances. This has reaffirmed cooperation between the allies to ensure regional security. That said, Downing Street confirmed that they will work closely with international partners to stop any progress that could lead to the proliferation of nuclear weapons by the Iranians. Well, that's how things stand on this issue. It's curious because what Axios says is not that. The information they have from Washington is that if the military operation against Iran begins, it will be a very massive operation. In other words, they don't want a long war. They want something quick, not to overthrow the Ayatollah's regime, basically just to target the main bases and Iran's nuclear facilities. And beyond that, then pull back. I mean, it could last a few weeks. That's not the approach they have right now. And at the same time, it's a super unstable regime with intense protests because of how they treat the population, especially during the regime's weakest moments. From that perspective, let's move on and discuss the other important topics. Remember this man? Do you remember this man? Well, yesterday we were talking about this person. The Venezuelan regime imprisoned him just like that, without even saying why. And now, well, it's known that he has been released. They've already released him. He is the former director of Petróleos de Venezuela, Sociedad Anónima, and he remains under a presentation regime while investigations continue for alleged fraud and association. This is what they're saying today. The American oil advisor, by the way, and former state director of Petróleos de Venezuela, S.A. Evan Romero, was released from prison. He was freed this Tuesday. Well, yesterday he was released at night, according to reports, under the presentation regime. 4 days have passed. He was detained in Maracaibo, Zulia State, due to an alleged complaint of fraud and association, according to reports. The public ministry, under the control of the Chavista regime, reported that the arrest of Romero, 86 years old, and with dual American and Venezuelan citizenship, took place on February 13 at the Chinita International Airport. Well, he's been there since the 13th, so just imagine that's the situation. Also, another topic that catches my attention over there in Venezuela is this. Look, well, the Venezuelan regime received the Prime Minister of Qatar to strengthen bilateral relations. It's curious, Al-Thani, they say, since he has had this approach with Caracas, and well, Qatar is an ally of the United States. Right now, well, landing in Venezuela, right? It's also going to be interesting. There will be dialogue, there will be conversation between both countries, between Qatar and Venezuela itself, two oil-producing countries. By the way, look, it's surprising, all those ships are oil tankers. Just look at the number. All oil tankers that can't pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Because, well, Iran is conducting military exercises. This will last for a few hours, but still, it draws attention. Look at the amount of oil that can't leave in this video published by the Iranians. It shows oil tankers that can't enter the Strait of Hormuz. After it was closed, or had been closed for several hours, it seems that it was opened and then closed again. And well, they have an issue there, but they want to show strength. They want to show that they can close the Strait of Hormuz whenever they want. And this, well, creates even more tension, right? I'm telling you, this is not going to end anytime soon. They haven't reached an agreement yet, and now with the situation, but things are happening internally. Look at that. This explosion has been reported in Iran, and as far as we know, it was in the city of Shahryar, not in the province of Tehran, in Iran. Local media report the explosion occurred in a warehouse thought to have stored ammunition, munitions, and military fuel. So, who was it, or how did it explode? Was this sabotage? Was it something else? What's happening over there in Iran? It's also something that obviously draws attention. Look, another matter, moving on to other topics, also international ones, right? Let's go to Belarus, where some pretty interesting things are also happening. Look, there it is. As you know, Lukashenko, also known as the last dictator of Europe. That's not what he calls himself. He's definitely not the last one, but this nickname he has does catch your attention. I'm sure they're reporting on it right now. There's an issue involving the war going on between Russia and Ukraine and Belarus. Kyiv is imposing direct sanctions against the Belarusian dictator for providing Russian military infrastructure and allowing the deployment of missiles or Resnik on its territory. Ukraine is officially sanctioning Alexander Lukashenko. The Ukrainian president, Nomy Zelensky, announced a new package of sanctions against this figure for his direct support of the Russian invasion. Ukraine maintains that Belarus not only supports Moscow politically, but also provides key military infrastructure for attacks in Ukraine. According to reports from Ukraine, infrastructure is being developed to house Oresnik's intermediate-range missiles. This represents a direct threat not only to Ukraine, but to all of Europe. Russia is said to have installed relay stations on Belarusian territory during the second half of 2025, increasing the capacity to launch drones against northern Ukrainian regions from Kyiv to Volhynia. More than 3,000 Belarusian companies are involved. The Ukrainian government stated that thousands of companies from Belarus supply machinery, equipment, and critical components for the Russian military industry. It was also stated that Belarusian companies are delivering essential parts for the production of weapons that have been used against Ukrainian energy and railway infrastructure. Another issue is that the installation of intermediate-range missiles in Belarus not only increases tension on the Ukrainian front, but also raises strategic pressure from on NATO's eastern flank. In other words, it can affect not only Ukraine at this moment in this border area here, and also, by the way, its proximity to the capital, to Kyiv, but by operating like this with Russia, they also put Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia at risk, mainly. No, the flank of this part of NATO could indeed be at risk. For now, there is no reaction from Belarus. I mean, for now it's not clear what their reaction will be. Now it's almost 4 years of war. I mean, Belarus, although yes, possibly in a more indirect way, has been participating, but they have also tried not to get directly involved in the war. It's also an issue that draws attention because it's known that Russia has wanted to force them to enter the war. But we have to remember that the Belarusians do not agree with this war. In fact, there has been a good number of Belarusians who have joined the war with Ukraine and are fighting on the front lines. Because they are against Lukashenko, they are against this, and in any case, they want to be more European, less Russian. And well, it's a complicated issue because Belarus, Lukashenko, is very aligned with what Vladimir Putin says. Let's move on to other news. Thank you very much for that thumbs up. If you haven't done it yet, I ask you to help by sharing, subscribing, giving a like, and thanks also to the super chats and memberships. Thank you very much for supporting this news channel every day here, live, with what's happening in the world. And look, let's move on to another moment now. If you're watching this broadcast live, well, it goes to another broadcast. We're doing it like this, one after another. You're already connected. You don't have to close it. It goes straight through. And if you're watching it later, then you do have to go to the channel's broadcast section, and there you'll see the broadcasts we have. During the day, we keep updating the information, what's happening in the world. Thank you very much for joining us for a little while. Thank you for your conversation, for your chat. And remember, At night, we talk more in depth, also about what's happening on the planet. So, let's move on to other matters right now.